I think I'd like to spend the remaining time on a topic that I really didn't cover yesterday that's very important in Julian, and that is the idea of the Trinity in Julian. The Christian churches and in the teaching of the Trinity, they all acknowledge that in some way or other, the teaching of the Trinity is the highest, most sublime doctrine that has been revealed to us. And I think back of how little it has meant to me in my life. What's behind all this? Well, first of all, let me state, the Trinity is relationship. Father, Son, and Holy Spirit, a very, very imperfect expression of the divine relationship within God. It's very imperfect because it implies subordination. You have Father and Son. There you have causality, you have priority, subordination, none of which are present in God, and they're all present in the expression of the Trinity as we have been given it. This is the problem with God talk, it's never accurate. That's why it's better when it comes to God just to shut up and listen and don't say anything. That's what contemplative prayer is. But I remember when I was living in Israel, it was 1990, and I went with a friend to the Gaza Strip, and I had dinner with a Muslim family there, an extended family of about 40 members, and the men were sitting in this large room on this rug on the floor, and the women were bringing in these incredibly sumptuous dishes like a roasted lamb and all kinds of odds and ends in these huge platters and placing them in front of us, and I'm sitting there just having my third or fourth chunk of this succulent lamb, and all of a sudden the patriarch of the family who was sitting next to me, he was an elderly Muslim, turns to me and he says, "What is all this about the Trinity?" With a mouthful of lamb and, 2 minutes, I did not respond well. I didn't even have the presence of mind of St. Patrick, to bring up the shamrock. And I've been answering that question ever since. What is all this about the Trinity? And coming up with more and more answers. And unfortunately, I've left the Gaza Strip. But I remember in the seminary, I took a course on the Trinity, and it was given in our last year in the seminary. We were deacons, and because it was considered too sublime for lower classmen to even approach the theology of it. So, and I did well at it. I made a term paper. I got an A in the term paper, and I even gave a class on it and all that sort of thing. And I got an A for the course. And I remember I went home for Christmas vacation, and I was telling my mother how well I did on the course on the Trinity. And my mother, an Irish woman, born and bred, and turned from peeling potatoes into the sink, and she says, when I told her how well I did on the Trinity, and she says, "Yeah, now, what is that all about?" Get the same question I got from this Muslim patriarch in Israel. And honestly, I'm ashamed of myself. The best I could come up with was this. At least I had the leisure to talk to my mother and answer her, and I wasn't concerned with making an impression on her. And this is what I said. Ma, it's like the Trinity is something like God giving us a glimpse of what he looks like behind the shower curtain. I'm so ashamed of myself. Wasn't really until I started reading Julian that I had any kind of a glimpse or comprehension of the meaning of the Trinity. It's Julian's treatment of the Trinity. Remember I said yesterday one of the three types of visions, one of them was, they call it an intellectual vision. It was something given to one's understanding, and usually it had to do with the understanding of the Trinity, that intellectual type vision. But Julian does communicate it, and I kind of took St. Augustine over the coals yesterday, and I'll try to redeem him today, because a great deal of what we teach and understand by the Trinity in theological circles, at least today, does come from St. Augustine, and particularly Julian's. Julian knew St. Augustine clearly, and also another saint, St. Bonaventure, a Franciscan who wrote 100 years before Julian, and his great treatise, the Journey of the Mind or the Soul to God, he's just filled with the Augustinian understanding of the Trinity. And basically what is involved in this, St. Augustine said, all right, we are made in the image and likeness of God, but God is Trinitarian. We know that from Revelation, from the Scriptures. So therefore, our imaging of God in some way or other has to be Trinitarian. And if you ever read or get the chance to read St. Bonaventure, every page of it is the Trinitarian, and how it's all about relationship, and how we bear in ourselves the image of the Trinity. And Augustine said, it'd be too awkward to get into detailed description of it, but basically he says we have three faculties. There's the memory, and then there's the intellect or the understanding, and then there's the heart or the will. So the memory, the understanding, and the will. And this is how we reflect the Trinity, how we are made in the image and likeness. The memory is the image and likeness of God. Because we existed, and by the way, you'll never hear this on a Sunday morning unless I'm preaching, but we existed from all eternity in the mind of God. And I love how St. Bernard expresses that. This is the origin, by the way, of the Christian teaching on predestination, which has been so incredibly abused. But we existed from all eternity in the mind of God. As I said yesterday, God is perfect act. There's no change in God, because anything God can do, he's already doing. So our reality has been present before, in, and with God from all eternity. But St. Bernard says, however, at a given point in time, we were then enabled to return God's love. And this is our birth as human beings, our existence as a human being. But the memory is the manifestation of that is the Father, and how we are made in the image of the Father. Well, then the Son, you see, is the Word, the Verbum, the Logos, the wisdom of the Father. In the first chapter of St. John's Gospel, in the beginning was the Word, and the Word was with God, and the Word was God. And all things were made through him, and without him was made nothing that was made. So the Word, the Verbum, the Logos, the Son, is actually the wisdom through, in, and by which the Father created all things. This is taken up with a vengeance by Raymond Panikkar, by Karl Rahner, and others, Thomas Merton, the idea of the cosmic Christ. Christ is everywhere and in everything because it's through him, with him, and in him everything was made. And without him was made nothing that was made. So whatever exists is made through and with Christ. And of course, at one point in time, the Christ became flesh and dwelt among us. And we saw his glory. So the wisdom then that we have, ultimately, our wisdom is the ability to see reality through the eyes of God. That is how we resemble the Son, through wisdom. But the relationship of the Father and the Son, it's not a subordination relationship. It's not one of inferiority. It's not one of temporal precedence. It's one of total and absolute equality, a bonding, a oneness, a unity. And that oneness, that unity, or as we express it, that love that exists between the Father and the Son. And it's not something that exists between the Father and the Son. It is the Father and the Son. That love we call the Holy Spirit. And the Holy Spirit is the benevolence of God. We Christians, we Western Christians, we speak of the two activities of God. We speak of the activities of God within and the activities of God without. You use the Latin phrase, within, the activities of God ad intra, from within, and ad extra, from without. The activities of God ad intra is the Trinity, the Father begetting the Son, and the Son, the Holy Spirit proceeding from the Father, and the Son is from one principle. That's the activity of God within God's self. The outside, the ad extra, is the Father creating, the Son being the wisdom through which creation is made, and the Holy Spirit being the manifestation of the benevolence of God, which creation actually is. So the Greek Orthodox, I like the way they express it also. They say the same thing with different words. They say that in God there is essence, and then there is activity. The essence is the ad intra. It's the Father, the Son proceeding, and the Holy Spirit, the bond of the two. And the activity is creation, redemption, and sanctification. So I did have an inkling of this. I remember, to share a personal element, when my sister Helen died. She was my closest sister, and I was at her deathbed, and I was holding her in my arms, really, and I was saying the prayers for the dying, and all of a sudden, it was a gift from her, really. I said this prayer: "Depart, Christian soul, in the name of the Father who created you, in the name of the Son who redeemed you, and in the name of the Holy Spirit who makes you holy." And I had this incredible insight then, then I'm talking about the Trinity and our relationship to the Trinity. And it's very, very real, So Julian does show that. Julian brings it out in almost every page. And so she speaks of the Father as the creator. She speaks of the Son as the wisdom through whom the Father created. And then she speaks of the Holy Spirit as the benevolence, the love, which is manifested in creation. And so sometimes she doesn't even mention the Trinity. She just says the power, the wisdom, and the love. And she's talking about Trinity. And then she talks about it equally when she talks about the individual Christian. And she'll talk about the power, the wisdom, and the love that's in our soul. And that everything we do is manifested in power, wisdom, and love. And then that she's talking about how we are made in the image and likeness of God.